I never wanted to go back to that house. Not after what happened, and not after all the years I spent trying to forget. But life has a funny way of pulling you back to places you'd rather leave behind, doesn't it? It's been a decade since I left my childhood home. 10 years of trying to bury the memories. I thought I was done with it all, that the house had faded into the past like an old story you hear once and forget about. But when my mom passed away and the house was left empty, I didn't have a choice. I had to go back. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to the house was how much it had changed. The paint was peeling, the lawn overgrown, the porch steps sagging like they were tired from holding up the weight of the years. It was like the house had given up too, resigned to its fate. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I was hoping for a little bit of closure, a sense of peace, but all I felt was this suffocating heaviness in the air. The same feeling I had when I was a kid, lying in my bed at night, staring at the shadows on the walls, wondering what was really lurking in the dark corners of the house. I stood there for a while, just looking at it. The house I grew up in. The house that had been my prison for so many years. I could almost hear my mom's voice in my head, calling me inside for dinner or scolding me for staying out too late. But there was no sound now. No warmth, just silence. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled the same, musty and old, like nothing had changed since I left. I tried to shake off the unease crawling up my spine, but it was impossible. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I walked through the hallway, and the familiar feeling of being watched washed over me. I remember it like it was yesterday, the way the house felt like it was alive, the way it watched you. It wasn't just the creaks and groans of an old building. It was something more. It was like something was moving just out of sight, waiting for you to turn around so it could slip back into the shadows. As a kid, I didn't know what to make of it. I just knew that when I was alone, the house felt like it was never empty. I'd hear footsteps when I was the only one home, hear the faintest whisper of my name in the middle of the night, but when I checked, there was no one there. I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But now, standing in the house again, I wasn't so sure. I moved through the room slowly, not really sure where I was going or what I was looking for. The house felt smaller than I remembered, as if it had shrunk over the years, or maybe it was just me who had changed. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me, thick and oppressive. Then I went upstairs. The second I reached the top of the stairs, I felt it, the unmistakable chill of someone watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I froze in place. There was something in the hallway, just out of sight. A shadow, lingering at the edge of my vision. I blinked, trying to focus, but it was gone. I tried to laugh it off. Just your nerves, I muttered to myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That the house wasn't just old, it was haunted. I went into my old room, half expecting to find the remnants of my childhood, the posters on the walls, the stuffed animals on the bed. But there was nothing. The room was empty, stripped bare, as though it had been abandoned for years. The only thing that remained was the old window, cracked and dirty, letting in a thin sliver of light. I sat down on the floor, running my fingers over the hardwood. It felt familiar in a way. The quiet, the stillness. But it was wrong. Something wasn't right. Then I heard it. The faintest sound. A whisper. My blood ran cold. It came from behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, like something was pressing down on me, suffocating me. And then, like a punch to the gut, I felt it. A cold presence. I wasn't alone. I could feel it standing behind me, watching me. I turned around quickly, but the room was still empty. The whispering stopped. The weight lifted from my chest, but only slightly. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the empty room, waiting for something to happen. But eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to leave. I left the house that night, locking the door behind me. I didn't go back for days. Every time I thought about it, I felt that same chill, that same presence. It's been a week now. I still don't know what happened that night, what I felt in that room. But something's different. Something has changed in me. I don't know if the house was ever empty. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never was. But I'll tell you this. When I was there, it felt like something was waiting. Something still is. I didn't want to go back. Honestly, I didn't. But the feeling was getting worse, gnawing at me like a constant itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't just the whispers or the cold spot in my old room. It was something else, something deeper, something alive in the house. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't seen everything. The house had more secrets. I didn't know what those secrets were, but every time I closed my eyes, I could feel them lurking behind the walls, just out of reach. So, after a week of restless nights and trying to convince myself that I was just imagining things, I found myself back at the front door. The same door that had creaked open so loudly when I first entered. The same door that now felt like it was holding something back, something that didn't want me inside. I stood there for a moment, hand hovering over the doorknob. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Everything was quiet, too quiet. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I didn't want to go in, but I had to. I wasn't going to let fear control me. I was the one in control. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as I turned the knob. The door swung open, and the familiar musty scent of the house hit me like a wave. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to step inside. The house was silent, too silent, like it was waiting. I made my way through the entryway again, avoiding the stairs. But there was something about them, something about that staircase that made my heart race. I remembered the nights when I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, coming from upstairs. I'd lie in bed, holding my breath, hoping whatever it was would just leave. But it never did. I told myself it was just the house settling, just the wind outside playing tricks on me. But as I stood there in the dark hallway, staring at the stairs, I couldn't ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. I wasn't alone. I heard it again, the faint whisper. But this time it wasn't coming from my room. It was coming from upstairs. My feet moved on their own, and before I knew it, I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the shadowed landing. The darkness at the top of the stairs seemed to pull at me, like it was drawing me in. I had to know what was up there, had to. So I took the first step, and then another. The old wood creaked beneath my feet, and each sound echoed through the house, making the silence feel even more oppressive. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stopped at the top of the stairs, standing in front of the hallway that led to the rooms. The air was heavier up here, thick with a tension that made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure if I should keep going. But I did. I walked down the hallway, glancing nervously at each door as I passed. My old room was at the end of the hall, but it wasn't just the rooms that caught my attention. It was the stairs. Something felt wrong about them. There was a door at the top of the stairs, a door that had always been locked when I was a kid. I had never seen it open, not even once. But now, it was slightly ajar. I don't know why I went to it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was just desperate for answers. Whatever it was, I walked over to the door and slowly pushed it open. The room beyond was dark, but the moment the door creaked open, a sudden rush of cold air hit me. It smelled damp, musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I stepped inside, the door shutting behind me with a soft click. The room was small. There was nothing in it, just a dusty floor and old wooden beams along the ceiling. But there was something about it, something that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. It was like the walls were whispering. I turned around, almost expecting to see something standing there just beyond the doorway, but no one was there. The room was empty, except for the mirror. It was old, framed in dark wood, and leaning against the wall. It looked out of place, like it didn't belong in this empty, abandoned room. I stepped closer, drawn to it. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now I couldn't look away. The mirror was covered in a thick layer of dust, but there was something odd about it. It didn't reflect the room the way it should. Instead of showing the room in front of it, the mirror showed nothing, just a black void. My breath caught in my throat. I reached out to touch it, my fingers trembling. The moment my hand made contact with the glass, something jolted in my chest. The air around me seemed to grow colder, thicker, like the room was pressing in on me. My heart was racing, but I couldn't move. It was as if the mirror was holding me there, locking me in place. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow, steady, and unmistakable, coming up the stairs. I whipped around, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the footsteps clearly now, getting closer. But I was alone. I was alone. I turned back to the mirror, and this time I saw it. A figure. A tall, thin figure standing just behind me in the reflection, its face hidden in the shadows. I didn't dare move. I couldn't. I wasn't alone in the room. The figure was getting closer. Closer. I spun around, but nothing. Just an empty room. Just the silence. But I could still feel it. It was there, watching me, waiting. The house felt like it was closing in on me. Every floorboard beneath my feet, every creak of the walls, every gust of wind from outside felt like it was echoing with something far more sinister than just the house settling. I didn't want to go back to that room. The mirror had unsettled me more than I was willing to admit, but I couldn't ignore it. It was like something in that reflection was calling me, something I couldn't understand, but was drawn to nonetheless. I left the room quickly, stumbling out into the hallway, but the silence seemed to stretch even further. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if something was pressing down on me. The house wasn't just old and creepy, it was alive. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. The feeling, the pull, it was like something invisible had a grip on me. The footsteps from earlier still echoed in my head. They weren't a trick of my imagination. I'd heard them clearly, coming from the stairs, moving closer, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. I shook my head, trying to push the panic down. I had to stay calm. I was in control. I wasn't going to let my fear take over. I made my way back down the hallway, my heart still racing in my chest. As I passed the stairwell, I felt a sudden chill on the back of my neck. The whispering started again, faint, like the murmur of voices just beyond hearing. I froze. It was coming from downstairs. I couldn't just stand there, not after everything I'd felt and heard. There was something in this house, something I had to face. I crept down the stairs again, slower this time, my mind racing with questions. What was going on? Was it just the house, or was there something more? Had I been wrong all those years ago, when I thought it was all just my imagination? I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror, the reflection, the figure. I needed answers. The living room was just as empty as before, but it felt different. The air felt heavier, like the weight of everything that had happened here was pressing down on me. Then I saw it. At the far end of the room, near the back wall, there was a door, one I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't like the others. The paint on it was chipped and cracked, and the wood was warped, like it had been there for years. And yet, I didn't remember it being there when I was a kid. I walked toward it, almost against my will. The closer I got, the more I felt that sick, heavy feeling in my stomach. The door creaked open when I touched the knob. The room inside was small, barely big enough for me to stand in. It was dark, except for a thin sliver of light coming from a cracked window high up on the wall. I had no idea what this room was used for. Maybe it was a closet, maybe something else, but it felt wrong. There was something about the walls. The walls weren't straight. They curved. They weren't like the rest of the house, sharp and squared off. No, these walls. They were rounded, almost as if the house itself had a secret, hidden shape beneath its structure. I placed my hand on the wall, feeling the cool surface. The wood felt strange, like it wasn't really wood at all. I pressed harder, and then I felt it. The vibration. A hum. The walls were vibrating. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was this? The house had always felt wrong, but this was something else entirely. I needed to get out. I needed to leave. But then I heard it. A voice. It wasn't clear at first. It was too low, too muffled. But then, as if the room was speaking to me, the voice grew louder. It was a whisper at first. You know. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I spun around, looking for the source of the voice, but there was nothing there. Nothing. I stepped back toward the door, but as I reached for the handle, something grabbed my wrist. I screamed, yanking my arm away, but there was no one there. The grip, the pressure, it felt real. I could still feel the oldness of it, like an invisible hand had squeezed my wrist. I rushed out of the room, but something pulled me back. The house felt alive again, like it was holding me there, trapping me in its walls. I ran down the hall toward the stairs, but as I passed the door to the living room, I saw something. It was a shadow, a figure standing in the middle of the room, barely visible in the low light. I froze. It was the same figure I'd seen in the mirror. It was tall, thin, with long, gnarled arms that stretched unnaturally long. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. I wanted to scream to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in the room with it. The figure took a slow step forward, and then it spoke. You shouldn't have come back. Suddenly, the air grew thick. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, stretching toward me. The house itself groaned, the walls bending and shifting, and the whispering voices grew louder, swirling around me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I needed to get out. I had to get out. I ran, faster than I ever thought possible, down the stairs and out the front door, slamming it behind me. The feeling of being watched didn't leave, though. Even as I stood outside, I could feel it. The house wasn't done with me. I spent the next few days staying away. I didn't return to the house. I didn't even want to think about it. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the whispering again. This time, it was clear. You can't run. It's already inside you. I knew I couldn't escape. I knew the house had followed me. I couldn't escape. No matter how far I ran, the house followed. It was in my mind, in my dreams, and in every creaking sound I heard at night. The whispering had become more frequent, like a constant presence, always just out of sight. I knew I had to go back, but a part of me was terrified of what I would find. It had been days since I last set foot in that house, but the pull was too strong. The nightmares kept getting worse, growing more vivid, more real. I could feel the house's walls pressing against me, suffocating me like they were closing in. The figure from the mirror, it was still there, lingering in the shadows, watching me, waiting. I tried to ignore it. I tried to move on. But no matter what I did, it was always there. The house was calling me back. I didn't want to go back, but I had no choice. I had to face whatever was in that house, whatever had been waiting for me all these years. I drove back, not sure what I would find. When I arrived, the house looked the same as it always had, dark and looming against the grey sky. But the air felt different, heavier. I parked my car in the same spot I had parked so many years ago, the same spot where I'd first stepped onto the driveway and felt that inexplicable sense of unease. The ground felt unstable beneath my feet as I made my way up the path to the front door, the house towering over me like a giant with secrets hidden deep inside. I reached for the doorbell, but it wasn't there anymore. Instead, there was just a small weathered plaque, its letters worn and faded, but I could still make them out. It read, "The house never forgets." My heart skipped a beat. I felt a cold chill run through me as I stared at the words, the blood draining from my face. This was it. I took a deep breath, pushing down the growing panic in my chest, and stepped inside. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Everything was the same worn carpet, the same creaky stairs, the same silence that hung over the house like a shroud. But it wasn't just silent. It was oppressive. It was watching me. I could feel it. The walls, the floors, even the windows, they were alive with something I couldn't explain. I made my way to the stairs, but this time I didn't hesitate. I didn't stop. I was determined to get to the bottom of whatever was happening here. As I reached the top of the stairs, I felt it again, the pull, that unnatural gravity. Something was waiting for me just beyond the door at the end of the hallway. The door I had never seen open before, the one that had always been locked. But now it was open. I hesitated for only a moment before I walked toward it. The door was wide open, and I could see the shadows moving within. The room was cold, too cold. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I stepped inside. And then I saw it. The mirror. It wasn't just standing there anymore. It was hung on the wall, and it wasn't the same mirror I had seen before. It was larger, darker. Its surface was cracked, like it had been shattered and pieced back together. But the cracks didn't stop at the edges. They reached deep into the glass, cutting through the reflection like a wound. I stepped closer, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. I saw the figure again, tall, thin, twisted, standing just behind me in the mirror. But it wasn't the same figure. This one was smiling. Its face was a sickening blend of shadows and shapes, barely human, and its eyes were alive. "You should never have come back." The voice was low, distorted, like it was coming from the depths of the mirror itself. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. The house had its grip on me. It was too late. Then I felt it. A hand, cold. It wrapped around my wrist, its fingers digging into my skin. I tried to pull away, but the grip was too strong. The mirror seemed to distort, shifting like it was sucking me in. I could feel the force pulling at me, like something in the mirror was trying to drag me through. I screamed, trying to break free, but the hand, the invisible hand, pulled me closer, pulling me into the darkness that seemed to pour out of the mirror. The world around me began to blur, to fade. The house was fading, the walls distorting, until all I could see was the mirror, the figure, and then the voice again. "You are mine now." I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. It was just a dream, just a nightmare. But when I looked around, something was wrong. The room was too quiet. The shadows were wrong. I turned to my bedside table, where my phone lay. It wasn't my phone anymore. It was the reflection of the same mirror I had seen in the house. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the house that had never let go. It was me. The house had followed me. I could hear it now. The whispering, the creaking of the floors, the sound of footsteps coming from somewhere in the house, but there was no one else here. It's inside me now, and it's not letting go.